What's up, y'all? Welcome back. Happy 2021. Today is our first day in second semester. All right, topic 4, day 1. We are going to solve higher degree polynomials and radical equations. Okay, so we got 6 examples we're going to go through. A lot of this stuff you've done before. We're just kind of adding a little bit to it. Okay, so this very first one wants us to solve this. All right, so our goal is to solve for x, to figure out what the x values are. All right, now we're going to do this by factoring. Okay, and if you recall, the very first thing that we always look for in any problem that we ever factor is always the GCF, the greatest common factor. So we check that first. So if we look at these 3 terms right here, right, I have 2x to the fourth, 14x to the third, and 12x squared. They all have a GCF of 2x squared. So I'm going to take the 2x squared out of each of these. All right, and then I'm going to divide. 2x to the fourth divided by 2x squared is just x squared. 14 divided by 2 is 7. I had 3 x's, took 2 away, leave 1. 12x squared divided by 2x squared is 6. Right, so I was able to factor that and take that out. All right, now you notice I have something left inside of the parentheses. Okay, so this part right here is exactly like what we did last semester. So we need to factor this. We need to factor this again. So I took out the GCF, but now I need to factor even further. Okay, and if you recall, we talked about how to factor last semester, right? What multiplies to get 6, but adds to get -7. All right, so if we were to do that, the 2x squared isn't changing. Remember, I split this up into 2 parentheses. I know this probably seems like forever ago, but think about what multiplies to get 6, but adds to get -7. In this case, it's going to be x minus 6 and x minus 1, because -6 times -1 is 6, -6 plus -1 is -7. Okay, so I now have took this original problem and I've turned it into these 3 separate pieces, right? But my goal is to solve it. So after you have factored everything out, okay, I then have to take each one of these things and set them equal to 0. Okay, so I'm going to take this first one, 2x squared equals 0. Then I'm going to take x minus 6 equals 0. And then I'm going to take x minus 1 equals 0. And I'm going to solve each one of them separately. Okay, so we would divide by 2. So x squared would equal 0. And then to get rid of the square, we would have to square root it, which in this case isn't going to make a difference because the square root of 0 is just 0. So one of my answers is 0. This one I would add 6, so x equals 6 is my second answer. And this one I would add 1, x equals 1 is my third answer. So I have 3 answers here, right? 3 real answers, 1, 2, 3. I was supposed to have 4 answers. Notice that my biggest exponent is 4. Okay, so that means I possibly have 4 answers, but I only have 3. Okay, I actually have 4 right here, but only 3 numbers are showing. Okay, this squared right here means it's just repeated twice. So there's actually 2 zeros, right? 0 times 0 is 0. So I was supposed to have 4 answers, or I possibly had 4 solutions. I do have 4. This one just happens to repeat. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, I found all of my answers. All right. So we're just factoring like we did before, just now we're going to have bigger exponents than we did previously. All right. So let's look at this second one, x to the fourth minus 100. Okay. And this goes back to one of those special examples that we talked about. X to the fourth is a perfect square, and 100 is a perfect square. So I know that when I'm done, right, I possibly could have 4 answers. I should have 4 answers when I'm finished because my biggest exponent is 4. So let's see if that works out. These are both difference of squares. So if I were to factor difference of squares, right, remember you square root each of them. So x to the fourth would split into x squared and x squared. The square root of 100 is 10 and 10. One of them is plus, one of them is minus. Okay, just difference of squares, just like we did before. Nothing new. You just got to refresh your memory a little bit, right? Get back on that bike. And now I try to factor these 2 more, but I can't. So I can't go any further. So now I just set each one equal to 0. just like we did before. And then I'm going to solve each one of them. So first I would subtract 10. And then I got to get rid of that square. So to get rid of the square, I would square root it. Square root that thing. So the square and square root would cancel. So I'm left with just x. We are doing the square root of negative 10. The square root of negative 10, right? So whenever I square root, I have to have a plus or minus. But hopefully right now there's like bells going off in your head. You're like, dang, he told me something about this last semester. What was it? Whenever you square root a negative number, remember you have to put I in front. So there's two of my answers, positive I square root of 10 and negative I square root of 10. So there's two of them. Now I have to do that again over here. So I have to do the same steps, but now I'm going to add 10 and square root it. They cancel, cancel. So I'm left with x equals plus or minus the square root of 10. Notice this 10 is positive, so I don't have to put I in this case. I'm done. So plus I square root of 10, negative I square root of 10, positive square root of 10, negative square root of 10. Those are my four answers. And I knew that I was supposed to have four answers because the biggest exponent is 4. Okay? So whatever your biggest exponent is, that's how many answers you should have when you get finished. Okay? Real and imaginary. All right? Okay, the third one. This one's a little bit different. It just adds one extra step in there. Notice that both of these problems equaled 0. This one doesn't. So before we can do anything, I have to make sure that my problem equals 0. So I'm going to subtract the 24 first. I cannot do these problems until it equals 0. Okay? Because again, we're trying to factor, and the only way we can factor is if it equals 0. All right? So now we're just going to factor this thing, just like you did before. Don't let the x to the fourth and squared freak you out. Okay? As long as the first one is twice as big as the middle, basically double, you can factor it the same way. So try to think about numbers that multiply to get negative 24, but add to get 2. So if you remember last semester, we made this little x, negative 24 and 2. In this case, that would be 6 and negative 4. So I'm going to split this up. But now when I split it up, instead of just putting x first in both of them, I'm going to put x squared. And then put my two numbers, plus 6, minus 4. Plus 6 and minus 4. All right? And now we might be able to factor further. Like you have to check to see if you can. So you can't factor the first one, but you might be able to factor the second one. So let's see if I can factor the first one. X squared plus 6 can't do anything. X squared minus 4, these are both difference of squares. So I can do that one even further, right? So the first one's not going to change. X squared plus 6. The second one I can turn into x minus 2, x plus 2. And it all still equals 0. Now I've factored it totally. So now I can set all these equal to 0. So x squared plus 6 equals 0. X minus 2 equals 0. X plus 2 equals 0. And I can solve each one of them. Okay? So let's solve them. Subtract 6. Then square root it. Square root, square root. They cancel, cancel. X equals, it's plus or minus, but this is a negative 6. So remember, whenever there's a negative under the square root, you have to put an I. Plus or minus I square root of 6. Then we would add 2. X equals 2 for the second one. Subtract 2. X equals negative 2 for the third one. And we're finished. Okay, that's pretty much about as hard as it can get for those. Okay, so we have now solved higher degree polynomials. So that was the first thing we wanted to talk about. And notice on this one, I forgot one thing. We had the biggest exponent was 4, and we have 4 answers. 1, 2, positive I radical 6, and negative I radical 6. Okay, so we found our 4 answers. All right? All right, the next thing we are going to talk about is how to solve radical equations. Okay? Now, there's 4 steps. I know some of you like steps, some of you probably don't, but here are the 4 steps we're going to do to solve this. All right? So the first one is to isolate the radical. get the radical by itself. Okay, get the radical all alone. Nothing in front of it, nothing behind it. There's going to be stuff inside of it, but nothing after the radical or nothing before the radical. All right, then we're going to square both sides. Then we're going to solve for that variable, and then we're going to check the answers to make sure they actually work. Remember, last semester we talked about extraneous answers, meaning sometimes you get an answer that doesn't actually work in the problem. Okay, so let's go through these steps. So the very first one, the square root of x minus 3 equals 5. So the first step is isolate the radical. Notice there is nothing in front of this radical, and there's nothing behind it. There's only the stuff underneath, so it's already isolated. So the second step is to square both sides. I'm going to square this side, and I'm going to square that side. I square it because now the square and the square root will cancel out, and I am just left with x minus 3 equals 5 squared is 25. And now we solve this like you've solved a million other problems. You just add the 3. So x equals 28 is my answer. Now that's what I got. That doesn't necessarily mean that it is going to work, right? So I have to take that 28 and I have to plug it back in for x in my problem. So the square root, let's say x was 28 minus 3 equals 5. Let's see if that works. 28 minus 3 is 25. The square root of 25 does equal 5. So this one works. So my answer to this problem is 28. Okay, you'll see an example here in a minute where they're not all going to work. All right? Okay, we got 2 left. Look at this second one. So negative 7 plus the square root of x minus 4 equals 3. So now it's not by itself, right? My radical is not isolated yet. I have this minus this negative 7 in front. So I need to get rid of that negative 7 before I can do anything. So I'm going to add 7 first to both sides. All right, so if I add that 7, those cancel, and I'm left with the square root of x minus 4 equals 10. And now it is exactly like the problem we just did, right? The square root's by itself. So I'm going to square it, and I'm going to square the 10. Cancel, cancel. X minus 4 equals 100. I would add 4. X equals 104. So x equals 104 is the answer that I got. Okay? Again, doesn't mean it's going to work. That's just what I think it is. So I have to check it. I have to take that 104 and plug it back in here. So negative 7 plus the square root of 104 minus 4 equals 3. And I need to check this thing. So the negative 7 is going to stay the same. Plus 104 minus 4 is 100 equals 3. The square root of 100 is 10. Negative 7 plus 10 equals 3. And that is true. 3 equals 3. So therefore, we know we've got it correct. Okay, so 104 is the answer to this problem. Now, this last one is about as hard as these can get. Okay, at least I think these are the hardest ones that we can do. All right, this one's going to incorporate a lot of different stuff. So here's this one. So the first step is isolate the radical. Notice it's not isolated yet. Okay, so I need to get that radical all by itself. So I need to get rid of this 3 first. So I'm going to subtract 3. So that would give me x minus 3 equals square root of 4x. Okay, so we did the first step. Second step is to square both sides. Here's where it's going to get a little bit different. I have to square this side, and I have to square this side. So those cancel, and I'm left with 4x on the right. Now, x minus 3 squared is not just x squared and 9. You can't just square each of them. Remember, when something is squared, there's actually 2 of them. So I have to write that x minus 3 twice, and now I have to do again what you did in Algebra 1 and we did first semester, where you distribute. Right? So if I were to distribute, x times x would give me x squared. X times negative 3 minus 3x Negative 3 times x, negative 3x, negative 3 times negative 3 is 9. So I have to distribute and multiply. Different color here. And now these two in the middle are like terms. So the x squared is going to stay the same. Negative 3 minus 3 is negative 6x plus 9 equals 4x. All right? But we're still not done because we have to solve this. Our goal is to solve for x. So whenever it's squared, right, whenever there's an exponent, I always try to factor first. But in order to factor, it has to equal 0. This one doesn't equal 0 yet. So I'm going to subtract the 4x from both sides first. So x squared, negative 6 minus 4 is negative 10x, plus 9 equals 0. Now that it equals 0, now I can try and factor it. So try to think about again what multiplies to get 9, but adds to get negative 10. Okay, if you think about it for a minute, hopefully you come up with negative 1 and negative 9. So that means I can split this up into x minus 1 and x minus 9 equals 0. But again, we're still not done because my goal is to solve it. So I have to take each one of these and set it equal to 0. Set it equal to 0. I would add 1. So x equals 1 is one possible answer. X equals 9 is another possible answer. So I think 1 and 9 are my answers, right? I think. But I'm not quite sure that they actually work. So we have to check them. I know checking is a pain in the butt, right? But they're not always going to be the right answers. So I'm going to write this over here because I kind of ran myself out of room here. Let's check this problem. So I'm going to take this 1 and I'm going to plug it in wherever there's an x up here. Okay? So plug 1 in for x here and x here. All right? So that would give me 1 equals the square root of 4 times 1 plus 3. Let's see if that works. You can't even see it. 1 equals 4 times 1 is 4. The square root of 4 is 2. And 2 plus 3 is 5. It does not work, right? So this answer does not actually work. We call this extraneous. It's not an actual answer to our problem, okay, because it didn't check out when we checked it. So now we have to test the other one. Let's try 9. Hopefully 9 will work so we have at least some answer and it's not no solution. Plug 9 in. So 9 equals the square root of 4 times 9 plus 3. Again, I just plug 9 where the x's are. So 9 equals square root of 36 plus 3. 9 equals the square root of 36 is 6 plus 3. 9 equals 9 is my correct answer. So that one worked. So my answer to this problem is 9. All right, 1 was extraneous and didn't work. Okay, you guys have your Delta Math assignment. I appreciate you very much. Hopefully we will be back in school soon. Thank you all. Let me know if you have any questions.